Roby students, it's me, Miss Roby. Welcome back from spring break. I hope you had a great spring break. I missed you guys, and I still miss you, but it's good to kind of get back into the swing of things. Since we are here on Monday, we're going to jump into our reading mini lesson, which today we're going to talk about point of view in a story. So here's our learning objectives or our targets for today. Our goal is to distinguish our points of view as readers from that of the narrator. So the narrator is the person who's telling the story. So we're going to compare our points of view from that of the narrator. We're going to be able to also answer questions about a text, supporting answers with text evidence. So we're going to be asked a question and have to provide that great wrap. If you remember from the week before spring break, we talked about how do you answer with text evidence and give a great third grade answer. Below, you can see our last objective is we're going to be able to demonstrate our understanding by answering a close reading question about point of view in writing. So not only are we going to be able to answer that question orally, we're going to be able to write down our thoughts. So those are our learning targets today. How do we kind of differentiate or understand the narrator's point of view versus the reader's point of view? So before we even go further into this, we need to think about what is point of view. So when we are talking about point of view, we're talking about the perspective or the eyes from which a piece of text is written. So think about point of view. View is what you see, right? So if we're talking about what we see when we're reading a text, what kind of images are we getting in that perspective? So how are we seeing the eyes of the story? Now, if you, after you watch this video, go back and take a look at these two videos in the Google slide presentation. They give you a really kind of fun, engaging way and a little bit deeper understanding of what is point of view. So make sure you go and you actually play these after our video, okay? All right, so when we're talking about point of view, there's actually three very common points of view when we're reading a text. Now, we're not going to go super deep into these today because really we're only focusing on the narrator's point of view, which is that third person point of view when a story is told by a narrator. And so we know a story is third person because we have words like he, she, they. This is a story that kind of has someone who's removed from the text, and they're telling you what's going on. Now, this person is really kind of not a character in the story. It's not you as a reader, but it's someone who's outside. So a lot of folk tales and fairy tales actually have third person narrators. And down below here, there's actually two different third persons. So if you want to, even expand your knowledge a little deeper, you can look at third person limited and omniscient, which that's kind of a tough one for Miss Roby to say. But we're really going to just focus on the basic third person today. Now, there are also first person and second person. So first person is a story told by one of the characters. So when you're reading the text, the character is telling you what's happening to them. They're using words like I, me, we. So a great example of a book that does this is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which a lot of you have read or know the story. And that's a diary almost like of a journal of the main character's thoughts. And so that is a first person story. While when we are reading Rabbit and Coyote, that's a third person story because we have a narrator telling us what's going on with Rabbit and Coyote. They're not those characters. Now, second person is the story is told by a narrator who's talking to the reader. So you have a narrator directly talking to you. So they're using words like you and your. And a great example of this is any of those TV commercials where they're like, you will love this brand new toy, right? That's an example of a second person coming through because the narrator is directly speaking to you as a reader. But today, like I mentioned, we're really going to focus on that third person point of view, which is when a story is told by a narrator. So we're going to compare that narrator's view and our view as a reader and what we think is going on in the story. So we're going to practice that using rabbit and coyote. And if you remember, this is actually a passage from our text from close reading. So let's look at the question that we're going to try to answer about point of view. So kind of beginning with the end in mind, using habit 2 before we begin this assignment. So it says, pay attention to the language the narrator uses to describe rabbit in paragraphs 1 through 7. So right here, I can see that I'm going to look at that language that the narrator is using to describe rabbit in paragraphs 1 through 7. So I'm looking only at really that first couple pages in our story. It says, what does this language reveal about the narrator's point of view on rabbit? So that's what I'm looking for, is what is the narrator's point of view of rabbit on that paragraphs 1 through 7? Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Do you agree or disagree with this point of view? Cite specific text evidence to support your thinking. So not only, if I'm looking at this question, not only am I looking for the narrator's point of view, which it says it right here, okay, but I'm also having to decide, do I agree with that point of view or do I disagree? Okay, so if you want, right now, I would like for you're going to actually go back and I want you to reread those paragraphs 1 through 7 on rabbit and coyote. Now, if you want to pull up your text for close reading, you can follow these instructions here. Or if you would rather just read paragraphs 1 through 7 on this page, I also have the rest of the text if you need it. Feel free to do that. But I really want you, if this is a little blurry for you, I can only do it so much. Pull up that benchmark book and just read those couple paragraphs. But I really want you to look to see, can we identify the narrator's point of view? So let's take it one step at a time. So right now, hit pause. I want you to read paragraphs 1 through 7. All right, hit pause. All right, so hopefully you had a chance to read this passage. And if you didn't, make sure to hit pause and go back. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to skim. So remember, great readers, after we've read a passage, and since we've read this passage quite a bit, I'm going to do what we call skimming. So I'm looking for those key details. Now remember, we're all trying to figure out about that language that the narrator is using to describe rabbit and his point of view regarding rabbit. So when I was skimming this, one thing that kind of stood out to me is if I'm looking at the bottom of paragraph 1, it says the farmer came up with an idea to catch the pesky little thief. Now, if the narrator, the person telling the story, is calling the rabbit a pesky little thief, okay, do we think that's a negative view or a positive view about rabbit? What do you think? I think personally, if someone's calling somebody a pesky little thief, that's really showing that that person's not really liking it. Pesky means like you're annoying. And thief obviously means stealing. So if someone's an annoying little thief, that means that they don't really approve of them very much. That seems that they're annoying. They're also stealing things, which is not ever a good thing. Now, another thing that kind of popped out to me is if we look down at paragraph 7, it says, Rabbit figured the farmer was asleep and tried to shake him awake, but his paw stuck fast to the farmer. Rabbit, the biggest trickster in town, had been tricked. Look at that sentence here, the biggest trickster in town. Okay, so this is letting me know that in paragraphs 1 through 7, if someone's being called the biggest trickster in town, okay, that's proving again that that person is maybe not trustworthy and someone who's not very nice, right? So right away, I'm able to kind of understand what the narrator's view is of the rabbit. So on this slide here, I kind of put down some of that information that you heard me say in the previous slide. So the narrator's point of view. So when the narrator's telling me the story, I'm seeing that he calls him a pesky little thief. And look, you can even see here, I put exactly what paragraph I found that in. So we found it in paragraph 1, so I put it here. We also knew that narrator calls the rabbit the biggest trickster in town. That was in paragraph, it was actually 7, not 13. So Mr. Obie's fault. And actually, I'm going to go and I'm going to fix that just now. So let's go back here and I'm going to change that because we got to make sure that we're exactly accurate. So if I wanted to pull up that article, I can see exactly where it's from. Now, here, the last one, this is what I kind of came up as my conclusion, is that this shows that the narrator thinks, or the point of view, is that Rabbit is tricky and untrustworthy. Very sneaky. All right, so what is my point of view of the character? So right now I want you to go back and I want you to look very closely at paragraphs 1 through 7 again. Do you have a different point of view? What do you think about Rabbit? And it's okay, maybe you have a little bit more information about Rabbit from the other pages as well. How are you feeling about Rabbit? All right, so I went back and I reread Rabbit and Coyote, and I was looking for my point of view. So now that I know that the narrator is viewing him as sneaky and untrustworthy, okay, I need to figure out my point of view. So one thing that jumped out to me was that you can see that in paragraph 2, the next night, Rabbit returned to the garden for what he hoped would be more easy pickings, meaning that he not only did he come and steal in paragraph 1, which we know the narrator pointed out that he was a pesky little thief, but he even goes back to get more. So it's not like a one-time thing. He's making some poor choices consistently. So I'm thinking he's untrustworthy, meaning that he's someone who can't be trusted to make the right decision. Now, I kind of agree with him being the biggest trickster, and he was tricked, and he's a pesky little thief. So I'm getting a pretty similar vibe. Now, to even expand my reading, and this question really didn't ask me to do that, but I wanted to point out something that I also thought about the rabbit. Now, I looked at paragraph 12, where he ends up, not only does he, is a big trickster and he gets tricked, but here in paragraph 12, you can see that he actually ends up trying to trick Coyote to take his place in the box, and he does. So Coyote jumps inside the box, and Rabbit actually ends up fleeing into the fields, meaning that he leaves them in the box and just ditches them. Now, I don't think this is very nice. Do you? Like, he makes a poor choice, and he should live with that consequence of trying to steal, and he gets caught, but instead he makes Coyote kind of take the fall for him, which isn't very nice in my opinion. So my point of view is a little bit different from the narrator, and the fact that I agree with the narrator, but I also think he's also slightly untrustworthy. So let's recap my point of view. So I put here, like I said in paragraph 2, we can see that Rabbit is stealing food, and he tries to get more by coming back. And I also added on to that, thinking of he ends up tricking Coyote and places Coyote in the box instead of him. And so that was from paragraph 12. So my viewpoint was I see he's stealing, and his choices are selfish. He's really doing it only for himself and to look out for himself. And I agree with the narrator's point of view. I think he's untrustworthy, and he's a little bit tricky. So now comes to the next part. So remember, our objective was not only are we able to really orally discuss our reasoning, we have to be able to write it. So we're going to go back and answer this question. So remember, we needed to talk about what is the narrator's point of view, and if we agree or disagree with the point of view, and cite that evidence. Now, because of the fact that I wrote down my thoughts, this is a really easy thing for me to do. So let's take a look at our responses. Now, remember, when we're doing a close reading question, you really want to rap. Okay, now I don't mean hip hop rap. I mean, you want to restate the question, so showing you what is being asked. A, answer the question. So what is your opinion or knowledge of the topic? And P, you want to prove you're right. So making sure you are citing at least 2 pieces of evidence or details from the passage. So you want to make sure to include those. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is R, restating the question. So our question stated, and I'm going to pull it up here, was that what does the language reveal about the narrator's point of view on Rabbit? Do you agree or disagree with this point of view? So let's go ahead and let's restate that in a nice question that I can answer. Okay. So you can see here, Miss Ruby's already kind of pre-typed. It's a little bit easier. Okay. It says, in the story, Rabbit and Coyote, the narrator has a clear point of view of Rabbit. Okay. So did I take that question and really restate it, where I'm talking and looking at the narrator's point of view? Yes. So now I need to go to A, answer the question. So I'm going to pull down, what did I notice from the text? So the narrator calls the rabbit a pesky little town thief in paragraph 1, and the biggest trickster in town, which was from paragraph 13. Now remember, this isn't something new. The only thing is remember Miss Roby put 13. It really should have been 7. So I had to go back and fix that. Okay. So these are information that I found when I first looked at my article. So I answered the question that was a pesky town little thief. So it says, this shows the narrator thinks the rabbit is tricky and untrustworthy. Now, since this is a 2-part question, right, I have to talk about the narrator's point of view, but then I have to talk about whether I agree or disagree. So I have to answer the question and prove that I'm right for the first part of the question first. So did I answer the question that the narrator thinks the rabbit's tricky and untrustworthy? Yeah, I did. I talked about the narrator's point of view. Did I provide 2 details? Yeah, I talked about him being a pesky little town thief and the biggest trickster in town. Make sure you have to include the evidence. That's the only way you're going to get all of the points when you answer your close reading questions. And even when you take M-STEP next year, that is so important that you do that. All right, so let's talk about that second part of the question. And our second part of the question was, do you agree or disagree with this point of view? Now, because remember, Miss Roby wrote down her thoughts, and this is something that you can easily do on a piece of paper, right? You don't have to have a fancy Google slide like I do, but you could write down your thoughts. So remember that, he steals more food, and I thought that he was stealing, and that's selfish. So I agree with this point of view. So I'm going to restate the question. Okay, and so I'm going to put here, if you notice my response, I also agree with the narrator's point of view on Rabbit. Did I answer and restate my question? Yeah, no, this one I put him in the same sentence, and that's okay. Now, the next part says, along with stealing items, the rabbit even tricks Coyote into taking a spot in the box. And that's from paragraph 12. Okay, so did I provide some evidence? Yeah, now because I did have 2 pieces of evidence at the top, it's okay if I only put maybe 1 additional example. That is perfectly fine. Okay, but I do need to talk about, what did I view? I said this proves that Rabbit is tricky and only cares about himself. So ultimately, did I answer those questions? Did I answer what was the narrator's point of view? Yeah, I did, right? It's right here. Okay, did I answer the second part, which was, do I agree and give my evidence? Yeah, it's right here. Okay, so this is a great example of a wonderful 3rd grade reading, close reading question about point of view. So remember, our goal today was all about, what is the narrator's point of view and what is my point of view. Now, sometimes they're going to match up. Like in Rabbit and Coyote, I agree. Okay, I agree that Rabbit is very tricky. But sometimes you may have a different point of view of another thing. Just like, for example, Thomas really hates vegetables. He will not eat them, but Miss Roby does. So our points of view are different, and that's okay. So make sure as a reader, you have to be able to see, does this narrator agree with what I agree with? Or maybe we have a different viewpoint, and that's okay too. You just got to make sure you're respectful if you agree or disagree. So now, if you can guess it, it is your turn. Okay, so your goal is that you are going to practice distinguishing your point of view and that of the narrator. And really, you're going to be uncovering what is the narrator's point of view. That's really what I want you to focus on. So what you're going to do is I have a passage on the next slide. Now, I cut it and I pasted it into Google Slides, but if you want to print it off and underline and maybe take notes on it, you can do that as well. That's going to be in the Google Classroom under this assignment. So you can print it off, or if you want, like I said, I put the passage here. So it's up to you. You can either read it on here or you can print it off as well. Now, your questions are here, so you're going to be answering them in Google Slides, or if you print them out, you can write them out on a piece of paper as well. So hopefully you're going to be able to identify point of view, but if you ever need help, feel free to email me or text me. So just remember, keep up the great work, and if you ever get stuck, I'm always here for you guys. All right, look forward to seeing your responses. Have a great day.